Thank you, and thank you so much for joining this session on how to migrate your .NET applications to Azure. Before jumping into how, let's cover a few reasons why you might want to migrate from on-premises to cloud. And the first one that comes to your mind is cost savings. So you can save money on resources, maintenance, sometimes even real estate cost by paying only for cloud resources that you use. You can also optimize your workloads to run more efficiently and cost effectively on Azure. Whatever you use occasionally, you pay only when you use it. The next reason is flexibility. When demand spikes or goes down for your application, you can alter your resources instantly on demand. And you can also run your workloads closer to your users by using Azure's global network of data centers. Security is a very important point, and Azure provides built-in security features and tools to help protect your applications and data. Security patching is usually done by Azure, so you don't have to worry about that. Also, you can easily back up and recover your apps with Azure. And for extra protection, you can even store your backups in different geographical regions. If you have any requirements for compliance for your applications, Azure offers solutions for that and for various industries such as finance, healthcare, government, etc. And you have a single dashboard to manage and monitor all your resources. There are also Azure services to gain insights and analytics for your applications, and there are many more reasons. But in this talk, we wanted to focus on how to migrate and show you new things that we have for you. So when the decision is made, the process of migration applications usually works like that. First, like business decision, then overall evaluation, and then actual engineers are tasked to move applications to cloud. And that's usually when there's a lot of frustrations and pain points happening because there every application is different and have different dependencies, different specifics. When you move up to Azure, not necessarily it will just work. There might be some code changes that are required. In every case, it's a unique code changes, and there were no tooling or no straight guidance for all applications on how to approach that. That's the feedback we got from you guys, and we worked on building a tool that will help you with that and guide you through the journey. And you probably have heard about Azure Migrate. That is a great tool. And before, the experience was focused around agent-based VM and application discovery. So Azure Migrate provided a high-level VM config and large application scan. It was used mostly by IT ops, DevOps, people who are in IT and are managing IT portfolio, but these people usually don't work with the source code. And it provides great reports. It's super useful tool, but we have heard the feedback that when developers are moving applications to the cloud, then they need some help. And now we added the capability into Azure Migrate umbrella of tools. And now there is application and code assessment for you. So application and code assessment provides offline code and application assessment to give you all possible things that might not just work when you move to Azure, with the guidance on what you should do, how you can modify your code to ensure your application works smoothly in Azure. So this tool is for developers, dev leads, product owners, people who work with the source code. And as I said, it scans the projects and source code written in .NET. It discovers and assesses .NET apps and provides recommended code changes. And it also produces reports that you can use in your team, with your management, across different teams. You can see all the issues, incidents, and you can track them there. You can track the progress. So what this tool looks at, there are many things that might not work when you move to the cloud, and the tool tries to cover all possible areas that are risky. And you can see them all on the screen. That's database, authentication, message queue, file system, SMTP, etc. So we logged rules in this tool for everything that might not work. And actually, if your application is super unique and there's something that this tool has not captured, please give us feedback and we will add that rule for your application. And as a result, you will see a report, a compatibility report that you can see on the screen on the right here. So there you will see incidents, and in Visual Studio, you will be able to jump to the code and see where in your code that incident occurs. And also on the right, you can see there are some instructions on what to do with that issue. So on the screenshot that I have on my screen, your app is using Windows authentication which is not supported on Azure App Service. And there is a recommendation what you can do. There is a link to more info that guides you through how to set up authentication in Azure. So this is a separate tool from Azure Migrate, and for .NET, it's available in two flavors. It's Visual Studio Extension, and it's .NET CLI tool. In Visual Studio Extension, you will have more rich UI. You can work with issues. You can jump to the line of code where this issue occurs. But if you want to automate the process, if you want to make it a part of your pipeline, CLI tool is a great solution for you because you can just write a script and use that. As I mentioned, it provides interactive compatibility report where you can change the status of issues. You can mark them as resolved or as not applicable to you. And you can export those results into HTML, JSON, or CSV. And those reports you can share with your team members, with your management, and so on. And also, that is a tool for .NET. We have a very similar tool for Java. So if you're using Java as well, you can check out that tool for Java. And instead of me talking about the tool, I'm going to give the stage to Mike, and he's going to open Visual Studio and just show you that tool in action and talk about all the things that tool does. So Mike, take the stage.
Awesome. Thank you, Olia. Yeah, so like Olia said, we have this new Azure Migrate application and code assessment feature that is going to give you unique new insight into what you need to do to get your apps that are running today on premises running in Azure, in App Service, AKS, Azure Container Apps, wherever it is you want to run inside of the cloud. So let's take a look at how it works. So we start by installing that Visual Studio extension that Olia was talking about. I'm out here at the Visual Studio Marketplace, and I have found the Azure Migrate Application and Code Assessment extension. We want to go ahead and download that and install the VS extension. You will need Visual Studio 2019, which I have here, and you can take a look at that here. But if you don't have VS, you can install a the free community edition and get started with that. So let's go ahead and jump in. I said 2019, I meant 2022. Sorry, Visual Studio 2022, the latest version of VS. But once you've installed the VS extension, here I am in Visual Studio. You can see in the extension manager that I have the Azure Migrate Application and Code Assessment extension installed. So with that extension installed, what I get is a new option when I right-click in the Solution Explorer. I have this new command called Replatform to Azure. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, and this is going to bring up a new user interface where I can manage my application and code assessment reports for my solution. So let's go ahead and create a new report. Once I say I want a new report, the tool asks which projects I want to assess. Now, it will also assess any projects that the ones I choose depend on. So I only need to choose the top level dependencies. Like here, I have a older ASP.NET Framework version of our eShop sample e-commerce application. I've made a few changes to it to add a few additional dependencies that will make the report more interesting. But this is our simple ASP.NET MVC e-commerce sample that we use for a lot of modernization demos. I've got this one MVC app that's the primary project. It then depends on a couple of small class libraries. So when I'm choosing my projects, I really just need to choose those top level entry point projects like my MVC project. These other ones will get pulled in automatically since this one depends on them. On the next screen then, it asks whether I want to analyze source code or my binary dependencies. So you'll typically want to choose the first checkbox, the source code, because this is going to have the tool go and look at all of your source code and config files that are part of your solution. So this will be your C#, your Visual Basic source files. It'll be your web config, your app settings.json if you're using ASP.NET Core. But you also have the option of choosing binary dependencies, and you can choose one or the other or both. Binary dependencies will look at those references from your project that source isn't available for. So if you have a reference to a loose DLL or to something maybe out of the global assembly cache that isn't part of the .NET framework, or most commonly, this would include any of the NuGet dependencies that your projects depend on. By checking this box, we'll go ahead and look at the IL of those DLLs and assess them as well. So I always recommend including the first one, the source code and settings. And typically I start by only checking that box because this is going to give me insight into my code, the things I have the most control over addressing. It also can be useful, though, to check the binary dependency box to get the complete list of issues you might run into when you migrate to the cloud. The challenge, of course, with the binary dependencies is that you're going to get many more issues, and some of them may not be something you're able to easily address because if you're depending on a DLL and it has some code pattern that's going to cause problems in Azure, you don't have the source code, you can't go fix it. So sometimes it's better to just address binary dependencies by evaluating them at the NuGet package level and looking for updated package versions or something like that. But if you've got a loose DLL and you need to know if it's likely to work, checking this will analyze it for you, and you can reason about where there could be risk in your solution. To start with, though, let's go ahead and just look at our source code because this is the part of our solution that we're able to go and do something about. We click the Analyze button, and the analysis runs. eShop is a very small sample, so this runs in just a couple of seconds. For a larger real-world solution, it might take a couple of minutes, maybe as many as 5 minutes for larger solutions to do this analysis, but it doesn't take very long. Once the analysis completes, you're presented with a dashboard where you can see a summary of the results. You can see that we scanned 3 projects, found 15 different types of issues, and 37 individual incidents of those issues because some issues occur in more than one location in our solution. Those 37 incidents are estimated at 107 story points. The story points here are a very high-level, unitless estimate of the amount of work it would take to address these issues. This doesn't correspond to a particular number of hours or days because that detail would depend on so many factors that we're not able to estimate. This isn't even 107 story points as your team defines story point, most likely. But what it does is when I come in and look at the project by project breakdown, I can just make relative comparisons and say, well, the large MVC project has 101 story points. The small helper libraries are 3 story points each. Likely the bulk of the work is going to be in this project. If I evaluated another solution and it told me there were 200 story points worth of work, I could reason that solution will take more work to get running in Azure App Service than this eShop sample. So the story points are meant for just sort of comparing between projects and solutions at a high level. Coming back to our dashboard, you also see that the incidents are broken down according to their severity. There's 4 severities you'll see when you use the application and code assessment feature here. First, you have your mandatory issues. These are issues that the tool believes very likely will need addressed in order for this solution to work well in Azure. There are then optional issues. We have 6 of those in this case. Optional issues are situations where we have identified a change that we believe would improve how your application runs in Azure, but it's not a blocking issue. So for example, if you have app settings in your config file, you might have that flagged as an optional issue because we're going to let you know that now that you're running in the cloud, you can take advantage of things like Azure App configuration, Azure Key Vault, as more cloud-native ways of managing app configuration that you can easily update at runtime, that you can share between apps. So we're going to recommend that as an optional improvement. But of course, that's not a required change because if you have settings in your web.config or your app settings.json, those work fine when you deploy into Azure. Finally, the largest section is typically the potential issues. Potential issues are very common with the Azure Migrate application and code assessment analysis. And these represent scenarios where there could be an issue, but we can't be certain without a developer going and reviewing it. So much of what this tooling detects is going to be along the lines of a dependency on something that exists outside your application. So a potential issue might be if you connect to a database, you connect to a SQL Server database. Well, is that going to be a problem when you replatform to Azure App Service? Well, if the database you're connecting to is available from Azure App Service because it's an Azure SQL DB or it's running on an Azure VM, or even if it's available because you have express route or hybrid connections in use to connect to your on-premises resources, no problem. That's not going to be an issue. But if this database connection goes to something that exists in your local network and isn't going to be available from App Service, well, now we have to have a plan about how we're going to make this dependency work once we've migrated to Azure. We're going to have to maybe set up Azure Express Route, or we're going to have to migrate the database along with our application using some of the other awesome Azure Migrate features that help with database migration. So these sorts of potential issues are identifying that style of concern where a developer needs to go and look and reason about some sort of external dependency to make sure that it's been addressed or that it's part of your migration plan. So in addition to this dashboard view that kind of shows things at a high level, I already demonstrated how you can come in and see a project by project breakdown of your issues. You can then dive into particular projects, get a project level dashboard, excuse me, and you can then go and look at the issues per component. So a component at this point is going to be a single source file. Or if you enabled the binary analysis, DLLs would show up as additional components here as well. We're able to expand these and see the sorts of issues that exist on a component level. So in this case, my catalog controller, the tool has detected that there's an MSMQ dependency. We have links to where this is in the code. So it's on line 81 of my catalog controller, and I can click on that to navigate directly to the source code where the message queue is being used. Sure enough, we see that in, excuse me, in our catalog controller, when a new item is added to the catalog, we're queuing up an MSMQ message, presumably for some other service to come along and take some action when items are added to the catalog. Well, this is one of those mandatory issues where MSMQ isn't going to be available for most of our Azure PaaS environments. So now we have to think about, okay, how are we going to address this? On the right, we have guidance. We have a snippet of where this is being used in our source code. So this is my code here in the description. And we have an explanation of options we should consider in the cloud. So if we were using MSMQ for messaging, maybe now that we're running in Azure, we want to look at something like Azure Service Bus or Azure Queue Storage as a messaging option that's going to be more native to Azure. Now, at the bottom of the message, we have a series of links to relevant documentation to help me get started making this fix. You also probably notice we've got this dropdown here for state. Let's say I go in and I tear out the MSMQ dependency and I start writing things to Azure Service Bus instead. I can come in and I can update this to be resolved instead of active. And now when I go in and look at my report, I'll see that this particular set of 2 incidents have been resolved. We have a save button. You can save this report to disk. And now I can go away, come back another day, open up this existing report, and we'll have saved this state showing that the catalog controller issue has been addressed. In addition to various views in here where you can see incidents according to component or according to the high-level issue type that they belong to, we also have the ability to export this report outside of Visual Studio. We can export it as JSON, which is going to be machine readable. We have CSV if you want it as a spreadsheet, or you can export as HTML, which is going to give you the same view that we have inside of the IDE in your browser. Now I can share this with colleagues. They don't even need to have Visual Studio installed, and they can get the same dashboard, the same view of project by project issues that we need to be thinking about as we migrate to Azure App Service, AKS, or Azure Container Apps. We even persist that state so that we can see that I've already marked the catalog controller issues as resolved. One other thing I want to show, Olia talked about how you get the best experience using the Visual Studio extension, but we do also have a command line version, which does all of the same assessment. The only things you miss out on are the ability to link directly to your source code and the ability to actually update that state. So you don't get to go in and mark things as resolved or not applicable. But the same assessment can be done from the command line. And this doesn't even require Visual Studio to be installed. So this is a .NET SDK CLI tool. So you would install it the same way you would install any .NET SDK tool. So like if you have used our .NET Diagnostics tools before or the .NET Upgrade Assistant, you run .NET tool install -G because we're going to install this globally, and the package is called .NET-AppCat. After you've installed the tool, it's very easy to use. You simply run AppCat. It takes a single command called analyze, and then you point it at the solution file or project file that you want to assess. Once you've done that, inside of your command prompt, inside of the terminal here, we're going to get walked through the same sort of decisions we had when we used the Visual Studio extension. So I get to choose which project I want to assess. I'm going to choose eShop Legacy MVC. I can choose whether I want to only analyze source code or also binaries. Let's choose both for something different here. And then I get to choose whether the report that the CLI generates should be CSV, HTML, or JSON. Let's go ahead with HTML, and we'll put it in a folder called output. Okay, I'm ready to do the analysis. So it's going to go ahead. It's going to open up my solution. It's going to walk through all of the source code. Since I chose binaries also, this will take maybe a slightly longer because it's also going to be evaluating all of the binary dependencies I have. And then I'm going to get, once this is finished, a report that looks just like the one we saw before, except you can see now we have a lot more incidents because if I come into projects and I look at my components, in addition to my source where I have the exact same issues we detected before, it's also looking at all of my NuGet dependencies. So I can see, oh, look, log4net is doing all sorts of stuff, which is probably fine because I'm not using those code paths. But this would be a way that I could get some insight into those third-party dependencies. Finally, the last thing I want to show off before we wrap up is a sneak peek of what's coming next. So this is all available today. You can install this CLI, you can install the Visual Studio extension, and you can start getting these insights today. But later on, what you're going to be able to do is even cooler. We've been partnering with the GitHub Copilot chat folks to add the ability to have Copilot chat interact with the Azure Migrate application and code assessment feature so that Copilot Chat will be able to automatically pick up the reports that are generated. It will summarize them for you and then walk you through the changes you need to make to your application to address them. I don't have a live demo because this is still very much in progress, but I have a small recording that the Copilot chat folks made for me demonstrating this. You can see here they have the Copilot chat window, and they go in and they talk to Copilot and they say, help me migrate my app to Azure. Well, because they've previously used the Azure Migrate application and code assessment feature to assess, they get a response back from Copilot that summarizes the issues they need to address, and it asks them for access to specific source files that it needs to look at to help them address these issues. They go ahead and say, hey, let's start with this first one, the database issues. And now it's going to, in a interactive conversational way, guide them through setting up resources in Azure that they're going to need, making necessary changes to their project, and just sort of generally in a conversational style, helping them address the issues. And you can see that happening here in this demo. So again, this part isn't available yet. It's going to be coming in the future, but this is the direction we see, really combining the best of the Azure Migrate application and code assessment feature with what you can do with Copilot Chat. So that is the demo, and I think at this point we can open it up to questions.